Do I think something like this can happen today? Well, that's honestly a good question. Maybe reach out to me in 2026 during America's Semiquincentennial. 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 Semiquincentennial.
Well, it's been 3 years. Time to hold up my part of the deal, alright? On July 4th, 1776, the United States would print the Declaration of Independence, with America declaring itself as an independent country. Fast forward 250 years later, and America is not in the best place right now. 50 years after the Bicentennial celebrations, when hundreds of locomotives were painted for the event, the trend continues for America's 250th. The question is, what did the Semiquincentennial provide for American railroads? Would it hold a candle to the previous bicentennial? Well, that's what we're getting into today, as we dissect and look into the Semiquincentennial locomotives. So, to recap, during America's bicentennial in 1976, a great majority of American railroads participated in the events by painting up several locomotives to commemorate the occasion, which resulted in quite the variety of paint schemes with many results to varying degrees of success. But that wasn't all, as there was also the American Freedom Train, which ran across the nation throughout the year, being powered by a few preserved steam locomotives, one of which was the future excursion star Southern Pacific 4449. To say this period of railroading was insane would be a massive understatement, as the bicentennial liveries this time were all over the place and gave each local rail fan something to look out for during the bicentennial year. It wouldn't be until 2025 when America started prepping for the 250th, otherwise known as the Semiquincentennial, and it seemed like there was similar stakes going on, with many rail companies painting up locomotives for such an event, ranging from the money-hungry Class 1 railroads to local short lines, commuter railroads, museums, and freight car organizations to name a few, each sporting colors of the red, white, and blue of the American flag. Mostly. And much like the bicentennial, while diesels were the primary source of liveries, there was also steam locomotives, electric locomotives, boxcars, cabooses, diesel rail cars, cab cars that also got the patriotic colors. And not just standard gauge. Not every company participated, of course, but it still felt like a majority of rail companies saw the splash of red, white, and blue for the 250th. Now that we got a brief summary of the Semiquincentennial out of the way, let's change things up a bit by going over a timeline of when everything was unveiled. This audio is likely being recorded around June, so if I miss any reveals after this, I'll show them on screen afterwards. Now then, let's begin. So the Semiquincentennial celebrations for this were being planned as early as 2023. Our first unveil was on June 12th of 2023, with the 25-mile Pennsylvania and Southern unveiling SW1200RS number 16 in a red, white, and blue livery, likely to coincide with the 250th, and being the first locomotive to be painted for this event. Ironically, this livery was being applied to a former Canadian Pacific GMD, but it's whatever. It would later get touched up around October 2025 with the proper 250th markings, completing the finished look. On October 23rd of 2023, the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Museum moved Reading T1 number 2101 into their workshop for a much-needed cosmetic restoration into a fresh coat of the American Freedom Train colors, and it gained some infamy for hitting a passenger car, but thankfully no damage was reported. And speaking of T1s, on November 11th, the American Steam Railroad Preservation Association, the owners of T1 number 2100, announced plans to have the Northern dressed up in the colors of the American Freedom Train once its restoration was finished in 2026, as it would carry the same livery worn by its sister, alongside a new number of 250. And then after that, nothing really new came out. Until June 20th, 2025, when the preparations were picked up once again, when the Wheeling Lake Erie outshopped SD40-2 number 1776, originally 6356, into its 250th livery, with a golden bell interestingly enough. And just a day later on June 21st, the East Penn Railroad out in Pennsylvania unveiled GP9 number 1700, renumbered to 1776. And then on the 4th of July, the tourist railroad Nevada Northern outshopped SD9E number 250 in one hell of a livery, putting the unit in operational service shortly afterwards, with this scheme being chosen by a lucky individual after the Nevada Northern held a contest on Facebook to design this scheme. August 19th would see Floridian foamers going insane when infamous commuter rail company Sunrail unveiled not only a locomotive, but a full-on train set, with MP32PH-2Q number 110, Coach 3004, and Cab Car 2011 being wrapped out for this event. Doesn't change the fact the horn still sucked. And that would be until October 6th when things picked up, when the Lake State Railway dropped an absolute peak when SC70M number 4670 was outshopped into this rather gorgeous livery. And then on Halloween, the first of the Genesee and Wyoming examples emerged, first starting with B40-8W number 4039 on the Connecticut Southern, then on November 2nd, C40-8W number 4033 on the Chicago, Fort Wayne, and Eastern, and the Kyle Railroad on November 7th with Dash 94460. November 11th, thankfully, would see the Reading Blue Mountain Northern unveil their unit in the form of SC40-2 number 3061, which is so much better compared to the previous examples. And then a day later, a steam locomotive joins the party, when the Okefenokee Chief, I apologize if I butcher that, a 282 Mikado on the Okefenokee Heritage Center in Waycross, Georgia, was spotted with the colors of the red, white, and blue, which is a rather nice case to see a small steam locomotive get the patriotic treatment. November 20th would see the Midwestern Short Line, Minnesota Commercial, outshop B23-7 number 76, entering in service with a simple but eye-catching design. And 5 days later, on November 25th, the Buffalo and Pittsburgh would see Dash 9 number 4434 join the collection. And thankfully, the color palette was actually improved. It wouldn't be till over a month for the next reveal on December 15th with another G&W based railroad, when B40-8 number 4028 of the Arizona and Eastern joined the ranks. Then on December 22nd, rail carpooling TTX began outshopping some high-cube boxcars into the literal scheme of the American flag, just with less stripes. And on that same day, another Pennsylvania-based short line, specifically the North Shore, unveiled SW1500 number 2238 into a pretty out-there livery, which was apparently all painted by hand according to some press releases. Which, if that's the case, is pretty damn impressive for a complex design like this. A day later, on December 23rd, New Jersey Transit would unveil one of its dual-powered diesel thingies, in particular number 4526, in a fully decked-out scheme. And the last reveal for 2025 was underwhelmingly another G&W based railroad on December 28th with Dash 9 number 4445 of the Indiana and Ohio joining the 250th fleet. With 2026 starting, things were looking strong as on January 14th, the nearly 3-year-long cosmetic restoration work on T1 number 2101 was finished and fully unveiled at the Baltimore, Ohio Railroad Museum. And 3 days later, on January 17th, the Providence and Worcester up in the Northeast quietly released the first G&W EMDs, in the form of GP38-2s, or GP39-2s number 2324 and 2325. And another B&P locomotive joined the 250th fleet 2 days later on January 19th with Dash 9 number 4426, but to no fanfare. And the reveals continued on January 21st when California-based Sierra Northern unveiled RP20BD number 250, a hybrid genset switcher made by RailPower. A bit bizarre that a genset joins the celebrations, but it does add for some variety amongst the diesels painted up. The next locomotive, or railcar, was unveiled on February 6 when the Naugatuck Railroad, a short line operated under the Railroad Museum of New England, unveiled its SPV 2000 railcar into its 250th livery, with the stripes being rather reminiscent of Amtrak Phase 3. Then on February 11th would see the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum throw some banners and a plaque on board its preserved VO1000, which sported the colors of the US Air Force, which was pretty fitting honestly. Then 6 days later on February 17th, everyone's favorite car-smashing Brightline unveiled one of its charger train sets with a small wrap for the 250th. And by that I mean they wrapped the whole damn train. And jumping back to museums, around this month, the North Carolina Transportation Museum in Spencer, North Carolina would give their preserved Southern cab units, number 6133 and 6900, a plaque for the 250th, which is rather reminiscent of the Southern's Bicentennial units back then. March 3rd would see the first Class 1 railroad unveil 250th locomotives, when Canadian Pacific Kentucky Fried Chicken unveiled one of its new Tier 4 GEVOs and a candy cane-esque livery for the 250th, with plans that a few more locomotives would gain this livery once they were outshopped. And a day later on March 4th, Canadian National unveiled its two locomotives, in the form of ES44ACs 1776 and 2026, a pair of former City Rail GEVOs in some wild designs, although it's fair to say that they weren't received well on the Canadian side. March 12th would see another small reveal from New Jersey Transit, when one of its Riverline Stadler train sets was given a small wrap on the side of the car body. Then on March 20th would see everyone's favorite Union Pacific Railroad unveil its contribution to the 250th, when SE70M number 4164 was renumbered to 1776, and it was nothing more than a fresh UP repaint of the 250th logo. That's it. Another G&W unit joined the fleet on March 25th, when the Sugar Creek-based Ohio Central revealed another EMD in 250th colors, in the form of former Union Pacific SE60M number 2516. April 4th saw the second CPKSI unit being added to the fleet, in the form of number 704, the number obviously referencing the 4th of July. Then on April 9th, the three remaining units were outshopped, each representing different dates for the 250th. And things only get interesting, as April 10th saw an operational steam locomotive join the party, when Tremont and Gulf number 30, a Baldwin 282 at the Texas State Railroad Museum, entered in revenue service with a livery that seems to be inspired off of Texas Pacific 610. And then on April 19th, the narrow gauge Cumbrous and Toltec would join in when one of its former White Pass Deal 535Es got repainted. Next up on April 27th was a 55-year-old Amtrak joining the party with a good case of quantity over quality, with 11 ACS64s and 10 ALC42 Chargers getting stickers slapped on them. And 3 days later on April 30th, Metro North, in all of their gloriousness, would cook another banger scheme, with Genesis number 225 getting renumbered to 250, alongside a fitting scheme for the event. And with May rolling around, the next reveal would be on May 6th, when the Naugatuck dropped another banger, with U23B number 2798, in a livery clearly inspired from the Delaware and Hudson. And jumping back to Amtrak, they would throw in 2 of their newest Acela train sets, and by that only wrap 2 of the power cars, into a quote-unquote revolutionary wrap. And returning back to other railroads, the Red and Blue Bound Northern added to the collection on May 8th, with one of its cabooses getting a patriotic livery. And around that time, another G&W based unit emerged, in the form of Berkshire and Eastern B40-8 number 5946. And next up is May 14th, when BNSF unveiled 2 of its 3 planned units. And holy shit! But the 3rd unit, number 250, was unveiled on May 19th, to equal fanfare. Anyways, the next day saw everyone's favorite Class 1 railroad, Norfolk Southern, announce their plans for not 1, not 2, but 6 locomotives for the event, with 3 of them planning to be aces, while the other 3 I'm assuming are GEVOs. And then on May 21st, we found out that the New York and Susquehanna would join the party, with SC45-2 number 3634 joining in. And then the next day on May 22nd, saw the first Norfolk Southern unit emerge, in the form of number 1776, dubbed the Bell. And while not 250th livery, when, on May 23rd, Southern number 4501 entered in service under its original green livery that it once wore during the 1970 Southern Steam program. May 27th saw another quiet release, when Connecticut's commuter rail company, CT Rail, joined in, with cab car number 1713 sporting patriotic stripes on the cab. And then the next day, oh boy, another banger dropped, with the Delaware and Lackawanna joining in when M630 number 3007 was renumbered to 1776 and repainted into a D&H-inspired scheme. Oh, and another G&W unit also joined the party with the Rapid City Pierre and Eastern. Okay. May 29th saw a popular excursion star join the celebrations. Not 4449, but a locomotive that could have been, when Norfolk and Western 611 was painted into the colors of the American Freedom Train. Now, this locomotive was proposed to pull the train back in 1974, but this never came to fruition. So it's kinda nice to see this what-if scenario becoming a reality. And now we enter in June 2026. And for the sake of time, I'm gonna speed run this month, so let's begin. June 1st with Union Pacific's Thing and New Hope Valley, June 2nd of the Grand Canyon, June 4th with the MBTA, June 8th with CSX revealing 2 units, June 11th with the Long Island and Cincinnati Railway Company, June 15th Norfolk Southern Lady of Liberty was revealed, June 17th with the Florida East Coast, okay, June 18th with a triple whammy with the Lake Superior Railroad Museum, the Prairie Line of Missouri, and another CT Rail cab car, June 20th with the Morristown and Erie, and the 23rd with the California and Western, June 24th with Metra and RBMN again, June 25th with Iowa Interstate, June 27th with Reading Toyota 100 being unveiled, and June 29th with Web Asset Management. And finally June 30th with Omnitrax. Oh gosh. Now that we've spent enough time here in this segment, let's move on, shall we? I remember bringing up in the Bicentennial video from 2023 that the idea of a sequel to the Freedom Train was being considered. And it seems like things are going well, at least from what I've read up. Unfortunately, Ross Rowland, the brainchild behind the Freedom Train, would unfortunately pass away on July 19th, 2025. He sadly didn't live long to see his vision come to life again. And this was the same person that brought the American Freedom Train to life well over 50 years ago. May he rest in peace. His idea of another coast-to-coast tour wouldn't be forgotten about, though. On October 27th, 2025, the Union Pacific would announce another tour for its PR Foamer iconic steam locomotive, Big Boy 4014. but the tour would have just not covered the usual Union Pacific trackage. But it was announced that the tour would cover the east coast of the United States, with plans to get the Locomotive down there in time for the 4th of July celebrations in Philadelphia. The concerts would see Big Boy 4014 decked out with white wall lining, which... holy! Anyways, alongside 2 auxiliary tenders for extra fuel, and 2 SC-70Ms, specifically number 1616, the Abraham Lincoln unit, and SC-70M 4164. Alongside the healthy assortment of passenger cars used for most of these types of runs.
Alright, passengers on board, eyeball 4014.
The tour would begin on March 29th when 4014 departed Cheyenne, Wyoming for a long trek down to Sacramento, California, with whistle stops being listed on the left on the westbound tour. They arrived in Sacramento on April 10th, starting off the first mileage of the journey east, which also was where construction started on the first transcontinental railroad. You know, that transcontinental line. The trip finally returned back to Cheyenne, Wyoming on April 24th, completing the western portion of the trip. But while the first part of the tour was complete, the eastern portion had only begun. As 4014 left Cheyenne on May 25th, with whistle stops along the states of Nebraska, Iowa, and Illinois on UP trackage, before entering in Midwestern trackage in Indiana, Ohio, and rolling into Pennsylvania with stops like the Steamtown National Historic Site, where another preserved Big Boy is located, and the Red and Blue Mountain Northern, which it will meet up with the railroad's diesels, but also its own operating steam locomotive, the Reading 2102, with plans to have the locomotive enter in Philadelphia for the 4th of July celebrations on said day. It really does seem like this is an ambitious tour, and I really appreciate that UP has gone through the effort on getting this coast-to-coast tour green-lit, meaning people will get to see an operational Big Boy running on territory it likely would have never touched at all. I wish for those that choose to go out for the Locomotive on its return trip the best of luck. and to enjoy the sight of an icon of steam traction that you probably don't get to see often. If you're gonna go out, please stay safe. I've seen a lot of videos recently regarding people standing close to the tracks or trespassing, and it's actually kind of concerning. The last thing we want for this type of excursion is for someone to get killed again. So please, when you're out, stay 15 feet away from the tracks and keep a good distance away, because trust me, you don't want to get hit by this thing, right? Regardless, the whistle stop dates are available on UP's website and will be linked down below in the description of this video. So if you want to see the return trip, plan ahead, bros, and happy foaming. Hello, you've made it to the intermission. Take a bit of a breather right now. Get some fresh air for a minute, get a snack, go use the washroom. We'll be back to your regularly scheduled programming in a minute. Okay, now we're getting to the most fun part of this, the ranking! So, you know how this will go. I'm going to be ranking these from the worst to the overall best. So there's quite a lot to cover here, so yeah. Although, I'm going to put a disclaimer here, all of this is purely my opinion. You're free to disagree with me as much as you like, that's perfectly fine, this is the internet after all. But don't be a dick just because I don't like something that you like. Because, I mean, that's just immature. Anyways, we have a lot of ground to cover, so let's actually get into it. The fact that UP went all out for a certain unit while completely dropping the ball on this one is really saying something on their priorities. Out of all the Semiquincentennial liveries, this is easily the worst one. Trust me, I have a lot to say on these units, but we don't have a lot of time here, so let's move on. I'm not as pissed about these as the UP example, but it's pretty much a case of quantity over quality. I kinda do wish that Amtrak actually came up with a special scheme though, knowing that they have a past history of making some pretty good schemes, all things considered. I'm really glad they changed the color palette of these because, oh my god, these look like an eyesore. I mean, it's Sunrail, what else do you want me to say? I appreciate the fact that they are being applied on critters, but yeah, the scheme is all over the place. I'm not too big on the scheme, but yeah, this is just meh. The colors though on the new scheme are kind of neat. Even if it is just a recolored Ferromex. I mean, I'm not a fan of the Southern's Bicentennial units, but they're a decent recreation, I guess. Even with the improved color palettes, the scheme is still mediocre at best. It looks fine enough on the Dash 9s and the GP38s, I guess. And the SE60M is okay. The wrap's okay, and I will admit it's a peculiar choice to apply it on a pretty niche light rail route. I mean, it does carry on the tradition of rolling stock being painted up, and it's eh. I mean, this one's a lot more simpler, but I'm not a huge fan of the yellow highlights. I mean, it's alright. Better than UP, I guess. I mean, considering that CN does have American trackage, I kinda get why CN made these, but I still think they're not the best. From a design perspective, 2026 is the weakest. Even if this was the first railroad to kickstart the whole fad, not my cup of tea. Decent preserved locomotive, but it's really only just applying a couple plaques and banners around it, so I don't have a lot to say on that. Interesting motive power choice, but yeah, it's whatever. Even if this is graffitied, this is still pretty damn good. It's simple, and it gets the job done. It's quite nice seeing these on the 4014 tour. A caboose getting special treatment in 2026? That's a first. Okay, maybe there's a bit of foamer's bias here. The B40s kind of rock this mediocre scheme in all honesty. Yeah, I was going to put this in below average, but it's okay. I hate the CPKC scheme, but it's a nice way to kind of take the existing scheme and slap on a special variant of it, I suppose. Between the two CN units, I'll admit, this is kind of the best one. It kind of does remind me of the IC units, in particular of the Eagle, but that isn't saying much. A gen set in the Semiquincentennial celebrations? That's a first. Out of the Amtrak ones, this is kind of the best one because at least they bothered to do something, but kind of wish they did the whole train set. Between the two CSX units, this one's design just doesn't sit well with me. Maybe it's just the red and yellow framing just clashing with each other, I don't know. It's kind of nice seeing a small critter and a pretty niche Pennsy steam engine in preservation get this treatment, so that's nice. I mean, pretty simple and straight to the point, so it's okay. Okay. Just okay. Not a lot to say here. No way! A niche park locomotive getting special treatment? Alright. Easily the best one from CSX's batch, and honestly, it just looks a lot more better on the eyes. The fact this little switcher is a mural, and this wasn't AI generated apparently, is really telling of the dedication here. It's kinda nice to see some Canadian motive power being entered into this event. NJ Transit doesn't really stop when it comes to cooking up banger schemes in all honesty. For the most part. Honestly, I like that the blue is a lot more darker here and that they kept the white splash of paint that the NS units had. I figured I'd just group the Norfolk Southern locomotives all together because my opinion's pretty much the same. Norfolk Southern has a tendency to make some really good schemes on some polarizing units. And honestly, this batch of locomotives is pretty nice to look at. The designs are pretty nice, and I do think they'll look pretty great when they're all finished. Interesting to see some B-boats entering in the party here, and the scheme does look nice, and it's pretty simple. Out of the bunch, I would say the one with the American flag on it looks more nice, but the one with the stripes is good. Didn't know that Jared entered in the party here, but the scheme itself is fine. It's nice to see some GP30s getting in on this, and honestly the scheme is nice, and the stripe work is interesting. Simple and effective, and it honestly feels like a scheme that would have been applied 50 years ago. Metro North cooking up another banger, what else is new? I hate Omnitracks, but geez. They really did well with this new scheme here. I love the fact it's taking a concept scheme and bringing it to life. The only thing that's holding me from putting this in amazing is the lack of white walls. I mean, seriously, this would have lifted the look of the locomotive. But beggars can't be choosers. It doesn't take away from the fact this is still pretty good. A nice blend of two classic liveries to make a pretty good Semiquincentennial scheme. Honestly, the stars on it and the stripes on the nose, just the icing on the cake. Not only is the scheme inspired from the D&H, but it's also applied on a U-boat, which is unheard of in modern day. Kind of like how the Preamble Express also wore a scheme similar to this. I don't think of the Morristown and Erie that much, but jeez. I didn't think they'd cook this hard of a switcher livery, like, damn! Nice to see some American steam locomotives entering in on this. And it does feel reminiscent of the American Freedom Train in all honesty. Even if this isn't applied in the colors of red, white, and blue, I still love that it's a pretty damn perfect recreation of a beloved scheme. A scheme that was applied back in '76, being applied to a modern sort of power, in quotations, is rather nice. Even Pensy-fan approves. Bringing back the legacy of the Freedom Train in style with one of its forgotten sisters. And speaking of, I applaud the B&O Railroad Museum for actually cooking and faithfully recreating this after it's been rotting out there for decades. This is another scheme I feel like would work perfectly well 50 years ago, and it's quite nice in all honesty. The extra stripe work and the colors just screams perfection. Even after a year, I still think this is a strong livery, even if it is just a Wheeling Lake Erie but patriotic. I love the attention to detail with the bronze bell and whatnot, which really does make it stand out amongst a completely black frame. Okay, so now that we've gone through all of those, if you've been keeping track so far, there's about 4, or by technicality 6, locomotives that have yet to be covered. And these are easily my personal favorites. Let's be real, it isn't no surprise that these are high up on the list. Starting off with the Delaware and Lackawanna, the more I look at this, the more I begin to love this even more. Not only do you have a really nice color palette and inspired livery, but the thing that's the icing on the cake is the bell, and the fact it's a faithful recreation of the Liberty Bell with the crack and whatnot. Which that is a nice attention to detail there, and which is why I hold it in such a higher regard now. There's so much attention to detail on this locomotive that it just screams perfection. Like, the extra red on the trucks, the stripe work, the stars. Everything about this just screams Semiquincentennial. And I really like that this scheme was specifically chosen because, on God, this is easily the best one. They really cooked with this one. And I really hope they keep this even after the Semiquincentennial celebrations. Honestly, I've liked this scheme since it was revealed. It's nice on the eyes, the motive power choice is pretty nice, and hey, the decals and the graphic work on this just screams, well, Semiquincentennial. And last but certainly not least, I'm saving the best one for last. And that one goes to BNSF. I'm gonna be so honest with you guys. BNSF was the last railroad company I would have expected to be a part of the celebration. Considering BNSF had a track record for completely dropping the ball for quote-unquote special units, I was not expecting them to completely cook with these liveries here. They could have easily just called in a day and just slapped the 250th logo on the side just like UP. But the fact that they actually went through the extra effort to make a full-on dedicated scheme, let alone applying it to 3 locomotives, is just screaming dedication at its finest. I love how the scheme works in the BNSF scheme, while at the same time basing it off of the previous Bicentennial units of the predecessor roads. I could easily see the inspiration behind not only the Santa Fe units, but also the BN units as well. Sort of like taking in the past schemes and adding in a modern blend on them. It's pretty much the graphic work and the mere perfectionism of these schemes here that I rank it as the best Semiquincentennial scheme out here. Hey all, Hoenn here. During the final stages of assembling this video, 3 more locomotives have been unveiled, so I might as well get them over with because people are going to ask them anyways. Carolina Coastal. The livery itself is pretty good, but the We the People just looks so out of place there. So, C tier is where I'm going to rank it. The main narrow gauge. Honestly, love seeing some representation for narrow gauge again. Although the tunnels are definitely weird, the scheme itself is fine. B tier. And you know what's coming up next. PCC appreciation, anyone? You mean to tell me that they power washed the locomotive to find this? Damn.
What the fuck is that?
Meh. Bro, you didn't even try. Are those Christmas wreaths? Okay, so here's the finalized tier list. So, yeah, let's finally move on. Gosh. I've asked myself a question during the production of this video, and it did remind me back to my old Bicentennial video in a way. Was the Semiquincentennial better than the Bicentennial in terms of the railroads? Not really, but not completely awful. Granted, it still feels like a smaller scale fad compared to 50 years ago with fewer railroads participating, but it still felt like the major names still had a part in it. I mean, all the Class 1s were in, including a handful of tourist operations, regional railroads, short lines, etc. But when you compare that to the Bicentennial, where it was more than just Class 1s and, short lines, you had industrial companies, terminal railroads, private companies, etc. Almost like the entirety of America's rail network just came together for such an event. I guess to me, it just felt like there was a lot more passion back then compared to modern day. Back when railroads felt like family-owned and operated companies and not just greedy corporations, if you catch my meaning. But also, ever since a lot of these units were revealed, it's mostly been a lot of negative stuff I've been hearing from people. Most because, modern railfan culture and, the current state of America. I've even had some people question on why such units exist right now. And yeah, I kinda get where people are coming from. It is a pretty rough year for many, all things considered. But what's really stopping people from still trying to have some form of patriotism on the 4th of July? And I still feel like these locomotives best represent that, still showing some level of patriotism during these tough times. Whether or not people tend to view them as genuine patriotism or just, crappy PR stunts is totally up to you guys. And it only leaves you wondering on how things will be during America's Tricentennial in 2076, which is another 50 years away. By that point, who's to say where the rail industry will be by then? Where Gevos, Chargers, or even the newest Acela train sets will likely be gone? Or who's to say that PSR will still be around, or autonomous trains or Goyslop like parallel systems being powered by AI or whatever will still be dominating across the US rail network? We can only speculate, really. And who's to say how much of a generational impact that trains will have in the next 50 years? I mean, the generation that would have witnessed the Bicentennial, or even the last days of steam, would have all passed on. And who's to say where railfan culture will be, if there even is any left? To me, the Bicentennial and the Semiquincentennial to an extent feel like something we could experience likely once in our generation, seeing colorful locomotives painted up for a nationwide celebration of patriotism is honestly worth some form of hype during these rather tough times. But at the same time, the Semiquincentennial still won't hold a candle to the Bicentennial in terms of the quality and the quantity of liveries. But I will say this, there is still a lot of effort being put into a good amount of liveries. Granted, you still have the duds like we talked earlier, but you could tell that a lot of care was put into some units. And hey, I appreciate the efforts that most of these railroads do. At least, debatably. Now, I would have probably ended the video on a note saying, oh, the Semiquincentennial locomotives are here to celebrate the 4th of July and whatnot, but I don't know. Let's be real, 2026 on top of the 2020s is a pretty crappy decade. And a lot of the stuff I've read up regarding America is genuinely pretty upsetting. I can only feel sympathy for those that have to deal with the bullshit that's going on in the country right now. And some people are wondering, what's really the point of celebrating a nation that's pretty much gone to shit? I mean, do we really want the 4th of July to be all doom and gloom per se? I know I'm not the only one that sees it like this, but even in the toughest of times, what is stopping people from celebrating, being a part of the nation that they've called home for 250 years? Honestly, I still feel like railroads were doing this to keep the trend alive even after 50 years since the Bicentennial. Railroads helped build America all those years ago. The Transcontinental Railroad is the biggest example. And in a way, America's economy has kept rolling because of railroads. They help connect one point of the country to another, and it's been like that ever since, even in spite of all the derailments and the PSR bullcrap and whatnot. And regardless on many units and how they look or not, railroads, at least a handful of them, still put in a lot of time, effort, and care, debatably, into many of these locomotives. You could tell that some designs here actually looked pretty good, I'll admit that, while some, could have been better, while those just phoned it in and called it a day. We all know that. But I still feel like it's a decent representation of still trying to show some patriotism even during the toughest of times. And that's what I want to close the video on. I wish my American viewers a happy 4th of July. Make do of the best today, spend time with family, enjoy the fireworks, eat out, go rail fanning, just enjoy the day. Be yourself. There is a beautiful world out there even during these tough times. Even if, you don't believe in all that, still, just enjoy today. Enjoy the life out there. This is Calia Productions, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care, folks.